Well, widening deficits, poor crude oil production, rising subsidy payments, and lingering foreign exchange challenge appear to be compounding Nigeria's revenue problems, making borrowing the last resort for the federal government in financing its 2022 budget. Unable to take advantage of higher oil prices, the call by some major oil-consuming nations to release their strategic reserves to check high prices is expected to further reduce projected income from an oil rally, despite low production. It will be recalled that President Muhammadu Buhari had earlier this year reiterated the ambitious goal of ramping up crude oil production to at least 4 million barrels per day and building a reserve of over 40 billion barrels. However, instead of increasing, the reserves and daily production are on a free fall. Well, let's talk more about this and, of course, other issues as we wrap up this week. I'm joined by Professor Ken Ife. He's the Chief Economic Strategy and a strategist and London Enterprise Ambassador. He's also a development economist. Professor Ken Ife, thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yes, dwindling resources and, of course, hike in subsidy payments or subsidy bills is something that is threatening. The minister was clearly saying it, that Minister of Finance. She says Nigeria is at a crossroads. If this is coming from her, how worrisome should we be as Nigerians?
Well, very worrisome times, actually. We know that in the last budget review put to the National Assembly, our deficit to GDP was 3.99 because our the amendment of the Act 2022-21 Act moved it from 3% to 4%. So we came very, very close to 3.99. But now that there's projection that it might well go up to 6.1, it remains to be seen. Then the second thing, of course, is that the subsidy has gone out of hand. I'm aware of the special circumstances surrounding the, PIA came into force and they removed the hands of NNPC from the till by making sure that they now receive about 10% of the revenue. And then they also still the sole exporter of crude and sole importer. But it would appear that quite a few things need to be done. They need to be refinanced in some respect. And there's a lot of dead wood that they are carrying on with. If you look at all the refineries, they're still maintaining the staff of these refineries without producing a drop of refined products. And there's so many dead wood that they are carrying all along. But then you could see a lot of those overheads seem to be impacting on the revenue calculations around the importation of PMS. Because what has happened now is last year, usually we expect about $3 billion every month from NNPC to central bank. And then, because don't forget that the oil accounts for about 80% of our Forex revenue. But we haven't seen any of that last year, and then even this year. And that was what triggered JP Morgan to delist Nigeria from the overweight category, the overnight weight. So that was an alarm bell. But having said that, the situation moved from, they've now put crude on a direct swap deal with foreign refiners. So what happens is that the crude goes and then we'll get back refined PMS, and the calculus is such that we're just not getting enough. So it has moved from a position where we're asking for 1.2 trillion naira subsidy to augment to now 500 billion every month. So that's why the projections are that we might end up from World Bank, we might end up with 5 trillion borrowing to just subsidize the fuel importation. Now that is not sustainable. We all know that it's not sustainable. But I know that there is hope, though, that when the Dangote refinery kicks in the next few months, there may be a clawback. It might come back down by about 40%. We don't know. But we shouldn't throw caution to the wind and continue. as if nothing has happened is very, very dangerous situation that we're facing right now. But having said that as well, there's more revenue coming to government now, even though 30% of that goes to frontier basin exploration. And then you now have more revenue coming to the FIRS. So nobody seems to be talking about that, but that is more revenue coming to the coffers of the government. But what is being taken away for subsidies is dwarfing what additional revenue that we're getting. So we still need to tackle, and the Ministry of Finance has an aggressive revenue mobilization program that hopes to move our government revenue to GDP from 7% to 15% by the end of next year. So we're yet to know how far that has come along, but they're frantically plugging holes and bringing more automation to the activities of FIRS to make sure that we get more money.
And even the oil space, where we will think that the monies will come from. Yesterday, a report from OPEC shows that even Angola has overtaken Nigeria as Africa's biggest oil producer. So we're not even meeting up for us to even make more money from that end. So it's double jeopardy one way or the other if I'm allowed to use that word, for Nigeria at this time, instead of making profit from the hike in the price of crude.
Yeah, well, that's true, actually, because when you ask NNPC what the hell is going on, they say, well, there's a lot of disruptions, attacks on the pipeline, there's a lot of stealing of the crude, and all of that restiveness in the Niger Delta region. So, well, we've always been aware of that, but I think it has assumed, an alarming proportion. And that's why I keep saying that we have to have a long-term view of the challenge that we have with the host communities. And if we need to do what the Saudi Arabia did, get a valuation of this company as they did for Saudi Aramco, sell off a part of this, and then get more community and more people involved in this company. So it becomes a bit more difficult for people to want to kill the source of our constant revenue and dividends and all of that. So that's what I keep saying, because I reckon that the NNPC might be well over 50 trillion naira in value. And if government can sell 40%, that will rake in over 20 trillion, and part of it will go to recapitalizing NNPC, part of it will go to wiping down some of the debt, and some of it will now come to, so there are, there's some use to that. Some will still pay subsidy, reduced subsidy. So I think we need to move to a sensible direction with all of this.
Let's move on quickly. It's also a time of rate hikes. Prof, it's an opportunity to talk about all of this. We see inflation, what's happening here in the United States, and everyone now thinks that hiking rates, interest rates, it's something that could rein in inflation, I don't know, you're a professional. Does it work in all instances when you try to use rate hikes to challenge inflation hike?
It's a big challenge for economies like Nigeria, because we are very, very complex economy. In most Western economies, the proportion of people that are outside the banking system is very small. In Nigeria, it's almost near 40%. So that means that you have challenges on transmission of monetary policy. Then there's also the fact that this Bitcoin business and the cryptocurrency thing are driving our young people out of the banking sector. Then you have poverty, where half of the population are poor, really, really poor, and you have 40% of them also below poverty line. Again, where are they accessing the money? And then also the third dimension is that the banks are not actually lending right now, or even though we have excess liquidity in the private sector, but the banks are not actually lending. And those who are capable of borrowing under stringent conditions may well be using this money to import goods from China and what have you, and then also diverting it into funding political activities. And so that's the reason why I support a rate hike for Nigeria, not just because it may cause some challenges around growth policy and the expansion, but the fact that you are going to use it on a temporary measure to restrict or make the people who are taking the money pay more for that, for that purpose. But we also have an intervention fund that has been extended. The concessionary rates has been extended to March next year. So much of the real sector, over 3 trillion naira is out there for the real sector borrowing, of which 1 trillion is for anchor borrowers, agriculture lending. So those are cushioning, just making sure that what we have, we are protecting the real sector that is actually giving us what we need to fight off this very high inflation. But that notwithstanding, this whole situation will come under review by end of March next year, when we may be considering whether to extend it or to begin to bring in other measures. But I also think that fiscal measure needs to kick in as well, because if money supply is an issue, you are using a rate hike to handle, then it's also important for the fiscal authority to borrow more from the domestic sources, because we are now inclined to borrow more for subsidy and all of that, borrow from domestic sources. So it's a way of mopping up liquidity, private sector liquidity in that respect, and helping augment and make it more effective, make the measure much more effective. But otherwise, it challenges growth and employment.
Well, before I go to the submission of the World Bank now reacting to our inflation figures for the month of May, we see that issues of foreign exchange still stares us in the eyes. Looking at dollar at the moment, the parallel market, above 600 naira to a dollar. That's if you want to exchange at the parallel market. But in the interbank rate is still within 400 and 415 naira. That's the CBN importers and exporters window. And now the CBN wants to pay about $1.7 billion outstanding repatriation funds and outstanding to manufacturers and all of that. How do you see this affecting that space, positively or negatively?
Well, in a way, it's going to create more pressure, because with the source of our Forex is severely limited. One, we have to borrow in dollar to actually make the dollar available for servicing the debts in dollar. Two, the major source, which is the crude, is just not bringing anything to the central bank at the moment. And that's probably what I say. That's why the JP Morgan lashed out. And then thirdly, we're relying on diaspora remittance, which is also in decline, although continuing bringing up, because we're incentivizing it with 6 naira to $1. So we are incentivizing, but it's never come anywhere near the level of $26 billion that it used to be for some years. Then you also have the vaporization of the FDI. FDI has been so disappointing, and you can't blame them because of the preponderance of structural factors affecting the economy and the Forex as well, operation. Then you also have the foreign portfolio investment, which is neither here nor there. And in any case, anyway, the normalization of monetary policy by the likes of America, the Reserve Bank, and followed by ECB and all of that. The effect of that is that they are now rate hiking. And when they are rate hiking, don't forget that over 60% of world loans are denominated in dollar. So what that means is that they may begin to reprice our loans in dollar. And that means higher repayment costs. And then some of the portfolio investments and foreign that are going to be walking away from our domain, heading out to where there's more, where there's more stability, going back to America to earn higher interest and the safer economy, and they are the ones printing the dollar. So we have double jeopardy in the Forex scene. But then, having said that, though, 93% of our Forex operations are actually happening within the Forex window, nothing window. So, and they've been fairly steady between 413 to 419, fairly steady. But where the 7%, which is BDC, is causing the greatest havoc, and that is because there is intense speculation on Naira. And then people are buying dollar because they're hoping that the Naira value will crash, and then they will make money by doing nothing. And then you have dollarization of our economy. You have politicians looking for dollar to settle. And in so many things, asking for that. And then importation. Look at the trade deficit at the end of last year, where we have, just with China alone, $2.44 trillion Naira deficit, just with China alone. So it just tells you that the importation, that crazy importation is still continuing.
Great stuff, Prof. Prof, the World Bank is now is up again, and you know, anytime the World Bank speaks, we take it so seriously here because, of course, they understand our economy and study all that is happening, realities on ground. The World Bank says with this development, inflation is about 17.71%. That more Nigerians might be pushed to the poverty line, particularly saying about additional 1 million persons. How would you also react to this ugly report?
Well, the World Bank has a sound macroeconomic modeling tool that even tells you that if there is 1% global rise in prices, that will result in 10 million people globally dropping into poverty. So I'm not surprised that they will get similar prediction for Nigeria. So yes, they may well be right, because you've seen huge inflation. I mean, it's over 1%. The inflation figure that we have now is about 17.11% compared to what it was, 16.7%. So yes, it will have an effect. It's a general rise in prices across all sectors, across all indices, and that will definitely push more people out into poverty.
So does it mean that as we move on to the elections, things will continue to remain this way, particularly our inflation figures? And do you think the MPC would have a rethink, particularly with the recent shift from 11.5 to 13%? Some say that would also have its impact one way or the other on the economic performance.
Well, the massive uplift, the lift from 150 basis point, that is from 11.5 to 13%, one will argue needs a bit of time to kick in. So, in monetary policy and even in fiscal policy, when you have this policy change, you have to allow a little time for it to take effect. So doing it a few weeks before you had the inflation, and don't forget that the inflation you are measuring was the one of last month in May, and then the decision was in May. So you need to give it a little time to see how it plays out. But we don't know whether the MPC will still take another view to continue to hike. It remains to be seen.
Thank you so much, Professor Kedife. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining the show, Development Economist there. Professor Kedife, do enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much.